Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Feria, and today's guest is Rich Ashton. Rich is at the tail end of a massive 45-year journey in small business ownership. He's here to talk about what happened 30 years ago. Rich experienced a failure so significant that it didn't just hurt his bank account, it robbed him of his confidence for years. He spent a long season wandering in what he calls the confidence void, trying to lead while secretly doubting if he was capable. He ultimately emerged stronger and now uses that experience to empower other leaders. He's here to talk about the long game of entrepreneurship, how to survive when your self-belief is shattered, and the wisdom that only comes from 4 decades in the trenches. So, Rich, I am very excited and honored to welcome you to FailCraft. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great to have you here. So let's get things started, Rich. You mentioned that your greatest failure happened 30 years ago, and the most damaging part wasn't the event itself, but the fact that it robbed you of your confidence for several years. That is a terrifying place for an entrepreneur to be indeed, showing up to work every day, but feeling hollow inside. I'd like to know, how did you function during those years?
Not terribly well. I started my career with a pretty rapid trajectory, and I was working for a large company, and I was successful. But I always wondered if I was successful because they were successful, or if I was successful because of me. I ultimately left that company and went into business for myself. But I still had to prove it to myself. And in the early years, it went fine. And then because the company that I purchased was in serious trouble and there were some changes in the economy and the banking in Texas, banking system in Texas was in a semi-collapse, I got right to the brink of failure. And I had always been someone who dealt with adversity with anger. And I was a very angry mid-40s young man. And when I say I didn't function well, it was because of the anger. It took me a while. I never went through the full failure. I got right to the brink and was able to pull it back. But I still, because I always wondered if I was successful because of me or because of the company I worked for. This was another chink in the armor. And so I still hadn't had major success on my own. And it was a bad place. And it took me about 5 years of soul searching. I reconnected with my Christian faith, and I began to look at the world a little differently. I'm married to a phenomenal woman, and her real strength is in building relationships. And I had resisted her style of building relationships. I'm not quite sure now, looking back, why I did that. But I began to copy some of her behaviors, and I allowed her to change me, and it changed me so much for the better. And so all of those things kind of conspired together to make me more relationship-oriented, more concerned about people, much less angry. And that unlocked then the rest of my career, which has been fairly successful.
All right. So you said it took years to get that confidence back. So I'd like to know, was there a specific moment or a small win that finally snapped you out of it, or was it a slow, gradual rebuilding process?
Yes, it was. It was slow and painful. There was no one watershed moment where I said,
Mm,
okay, I've got it fixed now. When you're running a small business, and my businesses are in the HVAC business, so they're seasonal by nature, and your success and failure is largely determined by the weather. And so we could be doing everything right and still have questionable times if the weather wasn't cooperative. So there was never a time in those early years where I could just pat myself on the back and say, you've come through the fire and everything's okay now. There ultimately that time came, but much, much later.
All right, all right. Rich, I'd like to know, you now focus on empowering other leaders. Do you think that failure actually made you a better leader? I mean, with the experience you've had to go through.
People say that they learn so much from failures. I certainly learned some things, but the things that I learned were the things I've already mentioned. The need to be more relational, the need to focus more on people and really focus on them, not just talk about focusing on them, but be connected to them. Go deeper than just the surface. As a leader, the better you know your audience, the more effective leader you are. The better they know you. I found that transparency was really an appealing characteristic in a leader. I was not at all transparent in my early years, but after my rebuild, I guess, of my leadership personality, I came back as someone who was, if not eager to share my failures, I was much more comfortable talking about them because I had survived. I was raised in a family where failure was not tolerated. And so there was a great deal of shame associated with failure or the potential to fail. Once I got past the idea of shame, shame is an incredibly paralyzing emotion. And once I quit dealing with things from a position of shame, it unlocked some upside. You mentioned earlier that I had lost my courage. I did. I was not the risk taker at 48 that I was at 43. I became more of a risk taker, although I think with age comes a little wisdom, and you don't necessarily take some of the foolhardy chances that you take when you're younger. But there was a definite loss of confidence through that whole rebuilding period.
All right, all right. So, Rich, you are finishing a 45-year run. These days, people are obsessed with overnight success and, the 20-year-old billionaires. What do you think the younger generation of entrepreneurs actually need to understand about the sheer endurance required to stay in the game for 4 decades?
I think that's a terrific question. I think endurance is the word. If you take my career, if I had believed the hype when I was 30, I was on a rocket ship. It didn't turn out that way. And particularly in small business, and Mike, I didn't invent anything. I'm just a business guy. I think focusing on the things that are really important, focusing on the reason that you're in business. In my case, it was clear that I wanted to provide exceptional customer service, and I wanted to empower employees. Once I'd figured that out, that's where my passion was, and that's where my enjoyment was. Once I figured that out, I never varied from it. And when I didn't vary from it, I had much more consistent success. So I guess I would say to the newly wealthy at an early age, get a grip on where you want to be when you finish your journey. Do you want to be one of those guys that rose quickly, failed quickly, and tried to get it back together? Is $20 million enough? Is $10 million enough? What's enough for you? When I came to grips with what that was for me, I quit chasing money as much as I chased peace, success, and happiness. And that sounds a little bit corny, I guess, but there's only one person that's going to be the richest guy in the world, and everybody else has finished second or further back. I am not a billionaire, but I lead a very, very comfortable lifestyle, and I'm a very happy man at peace with myself. I guess at 76, that means more to me than it would have at 46.
All right, Rich. So looking back now, with the finish line already in sight, Do you still view that event 30 years ago as failure, or do you see it as a necessary tuition you paid to learn how to run a business properly?
There's an old saying, I don't know who said it, but that entrepreneurs make much better decisions in bad times than they do in good times. And that was certainly true of me. I made some really good decisions during those rebuilding periods that
Hmm.
that built success later on. So I think it's a little bit of both. You always appreciate when you come out the other side of a catastrophe, you always appreciate it more. And so I appreciate where I am now a lot more than I used to appreciate it. But would I want to go through that again? I definitely would not. That was a scary, miserable time in my life. It affects, as an entrepreneur, it affects all parts of your life. It affected my kids, it affected my wife, it affected my friendships, and it sure affected me.
All right, all right. So you are at the tail end of your journey. You know, some founders struggle to let go because their businesses, haven't been at it for several decades. It's become their identity. So how are you preparing to step away? Is it hard to close this chapter?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that because it allows me to talk about my current chapter. And that is, I didn't want to sell the company. I wanted to train up employees to be able to run the company in my retirement. And I was able to do that. I really got active with that about 4 years ago. Developed a training program in the company. As I was playing around with the training program, I wasn't very happy with some of the results. And I began writing blogs to the leadership team every 2 weeks. And the blogs were about different leadership and management issues that we were facing. And they were in no particular order. And we got our employees, our leadership employees, to start talking about the blogs on a weekly basis. And once they started talking about the blogs and reading them together, they began holding each other accountable for what was in the blogs. And the leadership program really took off at that point. I did that for 2 years. I had 52 blogs written. And one weekend I read through them and I realized that I was getting a little bit repetitive in my message. And so I said, well, I'm nearly at the end of my career. These people are going to be comfortable taking over the business. I'm going to publish the blogs as a book. And so I did that. I cut the blogs from 52 down to 35, and I published the book last year. It's called Growing Your Own, and it details all the principles that I taught the leadership team. That the whole experience was successful enough that they now run the company, and I'm functioning in a chairman role. And so I meet with the president once a week and meet with the team once a quarter. And so my transition into this phase of my life, which is doing things like podcasts and marketing the book, it's been tremendously busy, and it has kept me from having any of those feelings of regret. My identity is not with the company. My identity is now in helping share the message that I've lived for 45 years with younger entrepreneurs and aspiring leaders. So it's very fulfilling, and I've not had a moment's worth of regret.
All right, all right. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. So for the business owner listening right now who has just taken a massive hit and feels like their confidence is draining away. So what's the one thing they need to tell themselves today to keep uh to keep that from spiraling?
I'd make two recommendations, not just one. I think the
All
first
right.
one would be acquire as much knowledge. If you're not on a program already of acquiring knowledge, begin to read regularly, listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks, however it is easiest for you, but make it a point to do it every day and read on a variety of subjects. So an effective leader is one who understands his audience and understands a lot about the world. So that's number one. Number two is just get a handle on who you really want to be, who you are, what your strengths are. And if you're not strong in certain areas, look for mentors. I'm very, very fortunate in that I'm around a lot of successful people. And over the years, I have learned different things from each one. Some of them don't even know that they taught me. But if I wasn't strong in an area, and particularly when I was really struggling, I looked for my friends who were succeeding where I was failing, and I tried to copy their behaviors or try to modify their behaviors and incorporate them into my style. It was very, very helpful. So gain knowledge and then watch successful people, interact with successful people, and shore up your weaknesses.
All right, all right. So, Rich, I have a personal one for you. After 45 years of wins, losses, and everything in between, I'd like to know, what does being successful truly mean to you at this point in your life?
Well, I think I said that earlier. I was lucky about 3 years ago. I had never thought of the word peace associated with me. I've had a busy life, a hectic life, a challenging life, and in times a very stressful life. And so the idea of ever being at peace was just something that never occurred to me. I heard other people talk about it. And about 3 years ago, I was out for a walk, and I don't know why it occurred to me, but I said, I am 100% at peace with where I am in my life. I have a happy family, contact with all my family members. I have a wide circle of friends. I have a great wife. I've had financial success. I have a great relationship with the Lord. What more could I want? And sure, I could have more money and I could have more stuff, but it wouldn't make me any happier and it wouldn't put me any more at peace. I don't know how many people can look themselves in the eye and say, I am at peace with where I am. But boy, that's a wonderful thought. And particularly since it was a surprise to me, I think I got a kind of a double dose. That was a great reality when it came on me.
All right, all right. So, finally, Rich, for our listeners who want to go connect with you or seek your mentorship, so where is the best place for them to go?
I'm always happy to hear from people via email. My email is rich@growingyourown.net. And then the website for my book and training courses and speaking engagements is growingyourown.net. And I love hearing feedback on the book. I love questions, particularly from young entrepreneurs.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Rich, it's been a truly great time having a conversation with you, and I am truly honored to have you on the show today. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Ezekiel. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate it.